Welcome to standing room only tonight at the museum, Highline Heritage Museum, for tonight's rainy 7 stories. Thank you all for coming. We have some new speakers tonight, which Crystal will introduce. I'm part of the museum. I welcome everybody to come back when we're open, Thursday through Sunday, 1 to 5, for a very nominal charge. Also, memberships are very reasonable. You can hit the QR code on your way out or sign up online any way you want to do it. We do a lot of events for members and non-members, do a lot with the community, so check us out online. Also, one thing we do every time we have a gathering is to take a moment to recognize that we are on native land. So we think in honor of those who have preceded us, including the people of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Nisqually, and Muckleshoot tribes. And with that, I'll have Crystal here to get the festivities going. Thank you.
All right, welcome to 7 Stories. I'm your personal cheerleader for the evening. My name is Crystal Hairston. I am so glad to be here this evening, so glad to be with you. What a gift it is to have standing room only at a place where we get to hear and be a part of one another's stories. So huge gratitude for you all showing up today. I would love to just tell you a little bit about 7 Stories if this is your first time. 7 Stories is a community event where 7 people from 7 different perspectives tell 7 different stories, not each, but one story each, on a particular theme. And tonight's theme is You Only Live Once, or Brush with Greatness. So I'm excited to hear this. All these stories are real, and the hope is that they're under 7 minutes. Crossing fingers. How fitting is it that we get to do this at the Highline Heritage Museum, which is the carrier of so many of our stories in the community, and they do it very, very well. So we do want to thank the Highline Heritage Museum, as well as our other partners, B-Town Blog, Burien Culture Hub, For Culture, the City of Burien, and the Burien Arts Association, and of course, you. Because we do not like telling stories to an empty room. And this is real. Thanks also to those of you who are watching online. You are welcome. Thank you for supporting this effort. Well, friends, in line with the weather, we have a few people who are under it. See what I did there? Under the weather? Yeah. Okay. I won't quit my day job. Before we begin, I do want to acknowledge that there are some people that are stepping up to tell last-minute stories or multiple stories. Tracy, thank you, so that we can get to 7 stories tonight. So don't be a gracious audience, please. And those who are telling the stories, please make sure that you adjust the mic for your height, speak loud, so that those that are in the back and those that are online are able to hear us. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right, so here's the hope. Tonight, the hope is that we're coming together, many of us a bunch of strangers, and that we leave feeling like acquaintances through the unifying art of storytelling. Sound good? Mm-hmm. Okay, so to start this off, I'm going to invite up Josh Gertzman. If I pronounce your name incorrectly, you can go ahead and yell at me and tell me how to do it correctly, okay? Josh is a longtime resident of South King County, on staff at Highline College, a volunteer with King County Search and Rescue, and a once and future tuba player. That's what I'm talking about. Josh emerged from the pandemic with the goal of doing more public storytelling, and this is the perfect place for that. So please welcome Josh.
First of all, I thought Dave was already giving me Scott was giving me a standing ovation, so I was excited. Okay, story time. It was late summer 1983, August, in Natick, Massachusetts, right outside Boston. That's a hot, humid, and balmy time of year. I was stepping into the high school band room as an 8th grader because Mr. Ash, Jerry Ash, had made marching band voluntary for the high school kids based on their complaints about having to wear red polyester uniforms and sometimes be embarrassed on the football field. So not enough high school kids decided to be in the band, so he had to recruit from the 8th grade. But there was about 50 total, anywhere from 9th to 12th, and then a few of us 8th graders. Walked in there in the band hall, much like this room today, crowded, and I was standing in the back, and all of a sudden, the seas parted, like the Red Sea. And there was pointing of fingers up on the bulletin board, and pointing back at me, and some chuckles, and outright laughs. Because on that bulletin board was the photo, tuba with legs. See, earlier that summer, my friends Brian, Craig, and I had signed up for the Natick Summer Band, thinking that would be something fun to do. Turns out only 9 of us signed up for that band program, and me being a first-year tuba player kind of stood out. And so we rehearsed for 6 weeks. Ms. Toronto was our director. She was the youngest band director in the school district, and if I can say now, even with my wife in the audience, pretty cute. So it was worth going to rehearsal every day. Our reward was to be able to do a concert on the bandstand in the Natick Commons, and a reporter had come to do a story about us to see if she could drum up some business. So that photo ended up on the front page of the Natick Bulletin, which in the days before internet and social media, yes, young people, there were days like that, that photo ended up being as viral as you could be in a suburb of Boston. But I had no expectation that it would be on the bulletin board in my first high school experience. Well, after that laughter subsided and everybody got their instruments, we were told to run down to the football field. And we got into drill formation, and everybody seemed to know where to go. The trumpets where the trumpets went, the flutes and piccolos went where they went, saxophones, trombones, etc., and then the percussion. But there was only one problem. There was only one tuba player. And as an 8th grade kid, I had one of those white fiberglass sousaphones. You had to kind of put it on, squeeze into it. So the drill instructor said, well, why don't we just stick you here right behind the percussion, back of the band, you won't cause any problems. So we stood on there, maybe north to south, facing the south end zone, and we were told to start marching. And when we entered about halfway, they blew the whistle, tweet, tweet, and we were to stop. And then we were going to do a turn, and then, trying to teach 13 to 18-year-old kids how to turn all at once, that's not an easy task. So they made us do it in slow, progressions. So now I was no longer behind the percussion, but I was next to the percussion. And we were tweet, tweet, mark, time, march, starting to go forward again. And right as I was about to go forward, the bell on that sousaphone swung behind me. And now there was just one line, tweet, and through the megaphone, tuba, check your nuts. That's right, I'm a 13-year-old kid and I was just told to check my nuts. But truth be told, those aren't nuts, those are little screws. But I was pretty embarrassed. So I quickly threw that off, timed them, got it back on, made it through the rest of that rehearsal. Next day, we're in the same formation, the same drill, the same turn. But this time, I knew that I had tightened those. So I thought I was good. We did the turn, and there it goes again. And out through the megaphone. What did we tell you yesterday? The entire drum line. Check your nuts! Now, this wasn't as hard as those double days that football players had, but it was a pretty long day. Later in the afternoon, we're in that formation one more time. I'm like, there's no way this is going to happen to me again. So I found some athletic tape, probably some football player had left on the field, and I taped it around those little screws, and there's no way this is going to get loose on me again. But just to be sure, when we went to make that turn, I put my hand up there to block it. And then I felt the excruciating pain of my fingers getting caught between two drumsticks. Because as it turned out, I was doing my job. But one of those drummers was sneaking around when I was next to him and unscrewing the bell on him. I'm like, what am I gonna do? And who is that guy? This guy with this long curly hair, deep green eyes, and the mischievous smile that you kind of see in those movies. So anyway, I thought I'm gonna have to do something. So the next time we're in that formation, I thought I'd outsmart him, and when we got to that formation, I took 2 steps to the left. Now we got another big tweet! Tuba, you're getting out of line! Get back in the center! Oh, great. So now I can't move away from him. So then I put my hand up there, he's gonna squeeze it between my his drumsticks. So I was like, I'm going to have to take matters into my own hands. So the next time we were in that formation, the next time we made that turn, instead of my left hand going up to the top, my right arm went straight out like this. And I landed a good one. I could hear it. But I also heard some profanity come out of that drummer's mouth. We had a water break, and I went over and I tried to hide, but I'm tuba with legs. I can't hide from anybody in this band. He comes over to me. I see a look in his eyes. I'm like, what is going to happen now? And this is the surprise. He reached out his hand. We shook. He said, tuba with legs, you're going to be all right. Well, that drummer, his name is Jim Riley. Everybody called him Riles. We did end up going on to become great friends. We played in concert band, jazz band. He went from becoming my tour mentor to becoming my mentor who we would tour with. And we played in some musical groups in Boston together too. So here's a brush with fame. I started this summer with my photo on the front page of the local paper. So everybody knew who Tuba with Legs was. But that friendship with Riles, he went on to music school, went down to North Texas, graduated from there, probably made his rounds. Y'all know the song, My Life is a Highway?
Yeah.
Famous in Cars? That's by Rascal Flatts. Jim was a longtime drummer with Rascal Flatts. Today, he's a percussion professor at, I think it's Beaumont or Bellefonte University down in Tennessee. He's a pretty famous guy, he does drum dojos and all that. But to me, he'll always be that finger-crunching, drum-sticking son of a good guy that we became good friends with. And that tuba that I played, that took me a lot of places too. We got to go to China. I got to go to the Rose Bowl as a member of the Michigan Marching Band. And in some ways, it even got me to meet my wife. That's another story for another time. Thank you. I have an artifact. I'll be around all night, and this is Tuba with Legs from 1980. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was definitely going to say, not too bad, Tuba with Legs, but you brought out the photo and beat me to the punch. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Josh, for telling that story. I probably could sit down and get some popcorn and listen to a couple more stories from you, so thank you. Our next storyteller is Tracy Croisier.
Oh, so close.
Okay, Croisier?
Quasier.
Croisier. Let me say that again. Our next storyteller is Tracy Croisier. How did I do? Let me tell you a little bit about Tracy. Tracy lives with her family in Bellevue, where she's a high school librarian. She also used to teach here in Burien at the Hot Yoga Studio, if you all remember where that was. And she's active in the storytelling community and has actually won a couple Moth Story Slam awards, big timer, wow. When not shelving books or carpooling with her daughters, Tracy enjoys hot yoga and outrigger canoeing on Lake Washington, yes. She's currently working on You Done Us Wrong, a historical novel about Carrie Buck and the still legal practice of sterilizing unfit women in the United States. So I am really looking forward to hearing from Tracy. Tracy, thanks for being here.
Thanks everybody for coming in on a rainy night and finding parking. I'm always thankful. I moved around a lot as a kid, which at the time, and actually now in hindsight, was really cool. We lived overseas. It was the 70s. We always got to fly first class. It was awesome. And when we finally landed back in the States, we did not have a tribe because we were the new kids. And we were the new weird kids with new weird kids clothing. And that continued. We moved, I think by the time I was in 8th grade, it was my 10th school district. So let me tell you, if you've never been the new kid, it is horrible. It is terrible. Nobody cares about you. The kids don't care about you. The teachers don't care. It's horrible. But you learn, I learned to be a chameleon. I learned to just fade into the background. And I also learned to just take my personality and make it as small and vanilla as possible, because this way you can't get bullied, at least for being a personality. I could be bullied for being the new kid. And we ended up, I went to college in Texas, and I could not wait to get out of Texas, and I moved to New York City, and through kind of weird happenstances, this little English major ended up working on Wall Street, which was awesome. And then we decided, my husband and I were like, let's buy a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere and start our own business, which seemed like such a good idea at the time. We had 2 acres and the house was 300 years old. And I did not realize how much being in New York City was my tribe, because it's like 75% type A, straight A nerds can't wait to live in New York. And then the other 25% are people that just happen to have grown up there. And then we're in this farmhouse, and my husband traveled, and it was just me. And I was like, oh my God, I miss a tribe, because now I don't have one. But the one advantage of living in Connecticut is that I had a car. And then I was like, well, maybe because I'd done some kayaking trips with my family, I was like, maybe I could do that. And I went to a kayaking store, and then almost as though, ordained, there was a poster up that they were having kayaking Olympic trials in a town about an hour and a half away, and they needed volunteers. And I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. So I signed up, and I couldn't wait to go. And it was very exciting because it was the first year that kayaking had been put into the Olympics. So everybody was really excited. And basically it was like 15, sort of like skiing, slalom, right? You're going down this rapid river, and you've got 15 gates, and the number one rule is the kayaker may not ever touch the gate, right? And they're hanging on strings over the river. And so I was so excited to be there, and I got there, and I'm like, hi, I'm your volunteer. It's like 4:30 in the morning. And they gave me a clipboard, and they said, you'll need to check in all of the competitors and give them their numbers and help them get their numbers on their life jackets. And I'm like, this is awesome. And so I did that. And then I noticed when I kept giving my clipboard to the girl in charge of money that she was not good at money. And so then I was like, you know what? Not that you needed this, but I was like, I worked on Wall Street. Do you want me to handle t-shirt sales? And she's like, in fact, I would. And I'm like, this day is getting better. And so then I was selling t-shirts. And then I noticed they were having trouble with their microphone between all the different gates. And so I was like, you know what? These are my people. I'm going to go help. And so I went over and I was like, hey, I've also done a lot of public speaking. Do you need help with that? And they were like, really? And I'm like, yes, I fixed their microphone, and I had a little quick seminar on how to not spit into the microphone or say your S's really loudly. And then, like within an hour, they said, you know what? You're really contributing to the day. Do you want to be a gate judge? And I'm like, oh my God, this is so awesome. And so all you had to do was make sure that they never touched the gates, right? There are these poles hanging across the river. And so I did that, and then I walkie-talkie, and I'm like, my God, this is like the best day. And my ex-husband used to get mad when people would say, what is one of the best days of your life? And he would say, it's when we got married. And I'm like, no. It was that kayaking day, honey. You are second place to kayaking. And so at the end of the day, we're getting pretty tired. We've been there like 10, 12 hours. And they said, would you like to be an area judge? And I'm like, oh my God. I started out with a clipboard. This is like my best career ever. And so the area judge was in charge of calculating all the scores. And then you were like the swing vote. So if somebody disagreed with something, then you got to, swing the vote. Really cool. And so then we go up, to the river. And I said, I can't see all the gates. And he's like, you see that boulder in the center? Yeah. I go, well, you're going to sit on that. And I hadn't really prepared to be in the water that day. And then the other thing that still amazes me is that there were a lot of snakes in the river. I mean, there were like more than 3 and less than 100. And I am really snake phobic. And so for the first time in my life, I was like, you could be an Olympic judge, or you could scream and run to your car and not be an Olympic judge. So you know what? Today's a new rule. Kayak judge Tracy loves snakes. Tomorrow, on Monday, Tracy will scream into her pillow for hours about this. But today, kayak judge, area judge in charge of 5 gates, is just gonna walk over the snakes and sit on that boulder in the middle of the river, and I did, and it was amazing. And I was so proud of myself. I'm like, this is so awesome. Plus I just had cute shoes on. I wasn't prepared for this. And then there I am, and right towards the very end, I believe it was either the last or the next to last kayak goes through. And they put their paddle, by this point, super choppy water, lots of white water, and they take their paddle and they hold it just like this up against their chest because they want to get through and not touch the gate. And there's this horrible sound of the metal. And what it was is the river was so frothy that the gate smashed into the kayaker and into their helmet and into their thing, but it made the noise. And so everybody, all my new friends said, well, they're disqualified. And I'm like, in fact, they're not. And they were like, what do you know? And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm area judge. Second of all, you told me to uphold the rule, which was the kayaker could not touch the gate. However, it's the gate that touched the kayaker. Is there a rule against that? And they're like, listen, the gate was touched. They have to be disqualified. And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm the area judge on the boulder with the walkie-talkie. I will not disqualify this kayaker. Unless you can show me in the rule book if there's a rule about the river touching the kayak, then yes, guilty as charged. But the river and the gate touch the kayak, which is much different than the kayaker touching the gate. You have to see where I'm coming from. And so we had a little bit of a standoff, and I stayed on my boulder. And at some point, hours into this, they had to call and wake somebody up in the International Olympic Committee, I think in Switzerland or something, because I was like, you gave me a very serious responsibility. I was promoted from t-shirt girl to area judge, and I take my responsibilities very seriously, and I'm very proud to announce that when we woke up the guy in the IOC at 4 o'clock in the morning, they ruled in my favor.
That's amazing. I think, brush with water or water with brush, I don't know. I think that is amazing. Thank you for staying on your boulder.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Our next storyteller is Wendy Swite. Oh, I was like, oh, sad. Our next storyteller is Wendy Swite. Wendy's story title is Preparing the Body. She lives in West Seattle with her husband of 30 years. That's big. And she has taught composition, literature, and college navigation at Highline College for 27 years. That's huge. Yeah. So we're honored to hear from you. Welcome, Wendy Swite.
All right, this is my first storytelling experience, and I agreed with Lori, who's sick today, that at 10 this morning I said, okay, I'll tell a story. So I have it kind of written down, but I'll improvise a little bit. But because I had meetings all day and I didn't have time to memorize things. So I'm going to tell a story. I was trying to think, because this last minute I thought, how do I fit the theme? Like, you only live once. And so I'm going to tell a story about when I was 37, and I had had headaches for 10 years, and they kept saying, oh, you have sinus infections. And then they discovered they were scanning me for my sinuses, and the technician scanned lower, and they found out I had a massive brain tumor in my cerebellum. And there was water on my spine and water on my brain, and the ventricles were closing. And so I met with the neurosurgeons, and they scheduled brain surgery right away, within the week, because it was going to close the ventricles. And they put me, apparently, when your brain doesn't have nerves, can't feel pain, but so they put me on massive doses of steroids because they wanted to shrink the tumor before the surgery. That was going to happen. And I don't really like alcohol. I like caffeine. I like to be energetic. And so massive doses of steroids. I was like, I was only living once every moment. Every moment was like so great to me. I was typing quickly about everything that happened to me. I was speaking so highly of steroids to my friends. They're like, I want steroids too. I just lived every moment, and still that time before and after the surgery is like some of the most precious times of my life. I was living once deeply every moment. And it's not brushes with fame, but brushes with greatness. I think about the story I'm about to tell you, like, what was brushes? There were no celebrities. Like, my daughter's friend just, like, walked right by Justin Bieber close enough to smell him. No celebrities in my story, but I thought, I'm going to tell you about this point. My head was on the belly of the neurosurgeon, and that was a brush with greatness. And I think about, when I tell you this story, I think it was a brush with my own greatness, right? And I'm not being narcissistic or braggy. I think we all have moments where we are great, right? And if you can realize you're having a brush with your own greatness, that's great, because usually the chatter in our brain is saying we suck, right? So that's my story. So I'm going to tell you the story. Okay. So I have to read it a little bit. Okay. So I call it preparing the body. So 2 days before the surgery to remove the tumor in my brain, I looked at my husband and realized he needed a haircut. I'd always cut his hair because we were really cheap. No Samson and Delilah complex. His hair at the time was really thick and curly, and when it grew out, it would grow into this strange big pompadour. And I was afraid I would wake up from the brain surgery and realize that I was married to Lyle Lovett, maybe even for longer than Julia Roberts was. And if you remember that, Google it. She was barefoot at the wedding. It was like 8 days of being married to Lyle Lovett. So in preparation for this haircuts, he would turn up the heat, he would strip naked, and he would sit in a chair that he always begged me to warm up for him. And I always refused. And it gave us an odd sort of marital satisfaction. You know how it is. Married a long time, like there's someone who denies, someone who's denying. It's like sadomasochism. So just, you're like, ah. So I would turn his head this way and that as I snipped, and he usually mentioned this time his mother nicked his brother's ear when she was cutting his hair during childhood. Blood everywhere. Kurt was screaming like a stuck pig. We'd chat about gossip and news and TV shows we were watching. After the cut, my husband would stand up and kick each of his feet carefully, just like a cat getting out of the litter box. I loved it. It was charming to me. So 2 days before the surgery, I cut my naked husband's hair. While I clipped, we talked about the X-Files episode we had just seen. X-Files was really big. In this episode, a man had a tumor in his midsection that turned out to be his evil unborn twin. As he slept, the evil twin crawled away from the good twin host and killed people. And then returned to resume his daytime life as a tumor. I suggested to my husband that perhaps my brain tumor was the good twin. And once removed, my evil self would emerge more fully. My husband this made sense to him. We thought this was an even better plot than the episode we'd seen on the X-Files. My husband imagined a final scene where my stunted, tumorous good twin would crawl into a parking lot and die, while speaking its final words softly in front of a security camera. They'd call in an FBI lip reader who would tell everyone that my dying good twin's words would be, "I just wanted to be loved." When my husband went to shower, I took my then 2-year-old son, Leo, from my mom, who had come to stay with us during the surgery. She was a nurse at the time, really helpful. I read my son a new book about a little raccoon getting his mother's kiss on his hand to keep him safe during his first day of school away from her. And the pictures, the little heart here, and he'd look at it away from his mom. We kissed each other's hands, and I pressed his small hand to my cheek. And then I noticed his nails were too long. I got out the clippers. We looked together at each of his fingers, little teeny fingers, and as I clipped, he said fruitlessly, "Leo, try. You try. Delilah in the Bible is conniving, a woman out to sap her man's strength. Perhaps she just got carried away with the gentle high of grooming. The day before the surgery, the neurosurgeon he wanted to glue these small plastic nodes to my scalp, and they were going to create this computer map of the tumor they'd use during the surgery. I had expected them to shave the back half of my head, so I'd asked this friend that night to come after I met the surgeon and cut my hair, something that would blend bald into bob. And here I want to break and say, I appealed to some of my friends and family members to, in solidarity, shave half their head bald with me. You see, someone has chemotherapy, and in solidarity, it's so touching. The son, friends shave their head bald. No one I knew agreed to shave half their head bald. That's what people think of me. Okay. Anyway, so I met with the surgeon. He told me he'd only be shaving in small spots for the nodes. He told me they'd do the full-on shave right before the operation once they put me out. But I wanted my head shaved, I admitted to him. I wanted to see what it would be like. And to my surprise, he agreed. In ancient times, the barber was the man with the sharpest knives, and he was also the doctor. In preparation for my new haircut, the neurosurgeon draped a towel over my shoulders. He pressed the top of my head into the curve of his belly and traced with his fingers where my new hairline would begin. I felt the buzz and the scuff of the electric razor with a kind of excitement. But sadly, the razor's battery died. He then tried with a regular razor, one of those little... But the blades were too rough to do anything more than rub in spaces for the nodes. Despite the failure, with my head on the doctor's stomach, I was ready.
Thanks. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Wendy. Our next storyteller is Abby Rolnick. Abby is an author of 3 novels, short stories, and a children's book. She moved to Burien in 2022. I still can't believe we're this far into the 2000s. 21?
Yeah, I'm
okay.
here longer.
All right, Abby says probably 21, for those of you that are counting and keeping track. To be near to family, and she loves to travel, walk, paint, and write. So please welcome our next storyteller, Abby Rolnick.
So this is a Tibetan singing bowl, and I want you to listen. Wait, how we go. Now hold on to that sound. Now imagine a Tibetan singing bowl this big, and I step into it. And that sound comes all the way up my body, through my head, through my heart, through my arms, and I'm transported to the pyramids, through every war that has ever happened. And I go back all the way to the primitive times, and I experience in moments thousands of lives. So yes, I lived more than once. And I felt that energy when I stepped onto the land of Nepal. And I was there to go traveling, and traveling for me is to be adventure, but I'm pretty cautious. This was not a trip through the Himalayas. This was not backpack. This was, a 71-year-old doing this. So I prepared walking and everything. But this is when we got there, the very first thing we had to do was hike up to our lodge. Now, the hike up, you know, I'm there for a month, and so I have bags, and so you've heard of Sherpas. Well, instead of having Sherpas, we had what our company called our porters. Now, the porters were women. They were from the villages, and they had baskets that were this big. So typically these baskets hold grain, but for us, they were going to carry our bags up to the lodge. And they walked up with barefoot, you know, with those bags, and they start going up, and our guide said, they'll take it to the lodge and we'll meet them there 3 hours when we arrive. Okay, 3 hours to get to our lodge. Now the roads are not straight, they're not flat, they're muddy or they're shale, you know how it can go this way and that, zigzagging and everything. But it's not the Himalayas, it was the Annaporas. Oh my God, the majesticness was just incredible. And so I felt alive, but I worked hard to get there. When we arrived, they were eating, and every one of our bags was put into a little cabin. Now, there weren't fancy cabins. They had a toilet, but that's about all they had. There was no electricity, nothing like that. So now, you know, I get ready to go, and then I see the women going off, and they're busy carrying their baskets. But now we notice that they're now filling it up with the grain that they need to take back. It's 70 pounds of grain that they need to feed. And oftentimes it's 2 or 3 times that they have to go and do this. So the next day, we go to a village. Now the village is 2 hours from where we are. So we get to the village, and what do I see? I see the women that had carried our bags. And this is their village. And they had taken it from after they carried our bags up to their place, then they went home. And so we watched all the children and we watched everything. Now this is a very special village. It is run by women because the men are either in the big city or you've heard of mercenaries. Well, there's a lot of Nepalese that are good fighters. And recently in the news, you can find that they're in Russia, but they've been in the Korea War. They can be all over. So you're learning something really quickly about the place you're living in, and you're amazed at how everything is functioning so well. There's women that are on the roof fixing stuff, and everything is basic, but they take care of everything. And then I look at one of the women, and she's staring at me, and I realized she had my bags, and she wanted to tell me something. Now she's surrounded by children. And she translated to the guide, I need to tell her something and it's important. And I'm wondering, what is this? She said, I have 3 children and 1 other boy. And for me, my husband died, so I have nobody to pay my bills. Now, part of the Nepalese tradition is family is foremost. But the women always go to the village of the men. So all these women that are running this village are not part of, it's not their village, but they're doing it for their men. So she had to make money. So she got paid to do this. But for her to do this, her 3 little girls were off at school, but her little boy had autism and nobody could control him. So, and she's looking me straight in the eye and she's giving me her truth. And she says, I have to tie him to his bed until I come back. Mm-hmm. And I look at her and I realize this is a great person. Mm-hmm. She knows what sacrifice is and she has deep love for this little boy. Mm-hmm. This is what sacrifice is. It has nothing to do with I believe. She has done this, and she wanted me to know that. So typically we would go to the schools and see the kids in the schools. Now I had brought with me all these supplies to go to the schools, and I had brought my children's book, and I had done all of this stuff, but they couldn't go. Because the rains were coming, and they had canceled the school. So we went back to the lodge, And then after lunch, we were told that they're opening up one of the schools. Did anybody want to go? Now there was, I think, 13 of us on the trip, and only 2 other women wanted to go. So I said, I do. And then I realized that the school was past the village we had just gone to. Now, the roads now were slippery because it had been raining, but they weren't too bad. And there's 2 other women, and they were, energetic bunnies. They had to prove themselves, they were just as old as I was, but they really, they were going. And I'm not that way. I really don't take chances. So anyway, we're going, and we get to there, and oh my God, it was just so wonderful. The kids playing and everything. On the way back, the monsoons hit again. Now, I didn't care that I was wet. I was more than wet. Everything on my body. I had a poncho on. I had all the right gear. I mean, I came prepared. And we were told to have our leech socks because there's leeches there. I don't even know what a leech is, but I didn't want one. Did not want a leech. So I have my leech socks on and I'm all prepared. But the roads were so bad. Where there was a little waterfall before that was beautiful, now is a gushing thing going across the thing. And those 2 women, and guess where the guide was? Up there. And I did not want to fall. I did not like being there by myself, walking. So I'm going like this, and I can just feel the fear. And all of a sudden, I'm trying to get across, and I'm going like this, and my hand goes back, and I feel something. And it's a hand. And it reaches out, and it's one of the older men that was left behind from that village. He had been following me. And he crossed me over the hard spot, and then he disappears. Now, it just didn't happen once. He followed me the entire time and helped me out 3 more times. Wow. And then he disappeared, and I went back to my lodge. Talk about greatness. Talk about greatness and feeling the lives of another person. Now, I get back in, and I'm super wet. And I know that the electricity has been on for the afternoon, and I'm going to have hot water. Now, I take off my clothes, and I know the guides have been pulling off the leeches from everybody's feet. I know that. I've been watching them. They caught a few of mine, but I have my leech socks. I get into the shower, and I notice this little black dot right here. And then I notice another black dot right here. And I'm thinking, oh. And I take a piece of toilet paper and I pull it off, and I pull the other one off, and I throw it down the toilet, because there are toilets there, and I flush it. And I go in and I take a shower, and I go in to eat my meal. Now, one of the things you don't do is drink the water there. And I know this. I don't drink water anywhere. I have my bottled water, and I do that. I'm really good about that. But maybe once on the trip, my toothbrush went into the faucet. Maybe just once. And the only reason I discovered this is because on my way back from the dining room, I am running. I go to sit on the toilet.
Oh, no.
And I see this black thing coming up like a head, looking around like an antenna. And then that other one's coming like this. And I said, oh shit, this is greatness, resilience. Okay, now I have to tell you, I got really, really sick. Not because of the leeches, but I was really sick. And so we talk about being sick. I was really sick. They took me to a clinic. It was 6 days of me really not doing well. I did the hikes that I was supposed to do, but that was about it. And if it was too hot, it was 98 degrees with like a 98 humidity, or it was monsoon. That was what we had. Beautiful. So the next part, now we get past that part, and the next part should be the easier part. It's rafting down a river. Now, it's called the Setai River, and it's beautiful, absolutely wonderful. What I read in the brochure, it usually has 2 to 3 class rapids. And I figured, well, I've done that before, although once I was in an accident and almost got killed in ice freezing water. You know, but I could probably do this with the group. I mean, I'm not by myself and I'm not leading it, but I do let the guide know that I have a little bit of trepidation, just a little bit. So I'm sitting in a place that's near the man who's calling, and then there's 2 guys up front that are the paddlers, but we're paddlers too, so we paddle. Paddle, paddle, stop, paddle, paddle, stop. And then if he says stop, stop, we all stop, and the others paddle, 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 paddle. Well, the waters come over you, not just a little bit. Of course, you have your poncho on and you're covered up. The waters come over you and through you, and there, you know, you can't win. I forgot to tell you a whole nother section. But if we have time, I'll tell you, but it really doesn't matter. Because the real greatness is what I'm telling you now. And it was the greatness of the woman and the greatness of the man and those great leeches. Now, they're a very modest traditional culture. And so you always cover up. So what I wore, because I knew it was hot, I had, you know what skirts are? I had a skirt on, and it came above my knee. That was it. You know, I didn't have anything really showing. But when I step out of the raft, apparently I had lost weight. And the power of the river has now taken my skirt down to my ankles, and I'm butt naked. And out of nowhere, a towel appears. And I think that's greatness as well. Thank you.
The leeches were great. They were adventurous. They made their way around and resilient. That's amazing. Thank you, Abby. We appreciate you telling your story. Our next storyteller is Crystal Lloyd. Crystal is my name twin. Is a person of eclectic interest and is a jack of all trades. Yes, master of none, that's okay. She is a transplant to the Pacific Northwest and says she's growing just fine in this forest soil.
Aww.
Please help me welcome Crystal.
Buonasera, mi chiamo Crystal. Io l'ho studiato all'Università di Firenze per 6 mesi. I'm Crystal, and this is the story of how I spent a semester studying in Italy. Now, it was the 90s, and it's not that unusual to hear somebody, a college student went to live in a foreign country. But it is when you're me. To say that I grew up poor would be an understatement. I didn't have prospects of college. I didn't have prospects of having more than one pair of shoes most of my childhood. But I wanted to go to college. And I did. And I paid for it myself by working all the time. Now it was easier then. It didn't cost as much. And they had lots of Pell Grants. So, I managed. But for some reason in my head, I thought it would be a good idea to get a liberal arts degree. I'm not sure why I thought that now. But, and so when I'm getting my liberal arts degree, an English degree, thank you to the other person who has an English degree, you have to take foreign language. Well, I didn't learn foreign languages in school. I didn't know anything. And I thought, I want to be cultured and interesting, so I'm going to take Italian. Nobody here speaks Italian. I will only be able to talk to the professors. It'll be great. So I started to take Italian. Well, I wasn't very good at it. In fact, I was terrible at foreign languages because I was really good at English. And I struggled. Oh, did I struggle. So fast forward to my final year, and I realized if I don't master this language, I'm not going to finish this degree in time, and I can't afford to go longer. So I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'm setting up this semester, and I start my fall semester, and I'm doing okay in Italian, not great, okay. But somehow I end up having to go to the office, professor's office, and I see this posting in the grand old ditto machines. Does anybody remember ditto machines? Yeah, ditto machine with this little great kind of purplish thing, and it says, "Go live in Italy for a semester." Now, I have interest in art and all kinds of things, but it never occurred to me to go live in Italy. And I went, oh, what do you take? And so I immediately got gushed and I got excited and I started asking the professor. And she's telling me, yeah, it's a semester in Italy, and one of our professors goes over and you get to study. And you don't just study the language, you also have to do all your classes. And I said, wow, that's amazing. And I thought, But I've never been deterred by the notion that I don't have the money or the way to do this. I'm that person who figures things out. So I went home and I thought, I stewed, and my husband knows this about me. I will think things through, and then I'll answer with a complete statement of how this is all going to happen. So my boyfriend at the time has no idea what's going on. And I start thinking about it, and one day I just turn to him, watching television, and I say, I'm gonna go live in Italy. What? Well, yeah, I figured it out. There's, it's a semester, and I need to finish my degree, and I'm gonna go live in Italy. He's like, how are you gonna pay for that? And I said, that doesn't stop me. So, there's no grand story to how I paid for it. I got student loans, But here's the thing about this. Not only was, not very many people in my family went to college. Certainly nobody went to Europe. So this was the big first. I'd never left the country. I'd never been on a plane more than 2 hours. And obviously, barely spoke a language, not sufficiently enough to help myself. So here I am, 3 months later, on a plane, all Italia, to Italy, and I barely speak. And I had to be very frugal, and I had to be very conservative, and I wanted to be very careful about traveling. I went with a single duffel bag for a semester. It was a big duffel bag. And my dad was so proud of himself, he had saved up some sort of points from something to be able to get me this duffel bag. And I thought that was really sweet that he had thought this through for me, So I came with this single duffel bag, and I go with a group. We had 25 students who were going over from 2 different universities, and we were going to go live there. And so we got to know the professors. There were a couple of professors that did speak English, and then there was one that we were going to meet there that spoke Italian. Anyway, and so we got to know some of the professors, and I will never forget Ron Smith. Ron Smith looked like Napoleon, and to say he was short was a joke. He was really short. But he was very muscular, and he was very funny. And he had explained to us something before we got there. There's all these wonderful things when you go to live in a foreign-speaking country where they kind of prepare you. They prepare you culturally. They talk about how you dress. They talk about fitting in, especially when you're going to go to the university there. And so one of the things he had warned us about was culture shock. And that's not a joke. That is not a joke. Like people have mental breakdowns over culture shock sometimes, especially if you are an American and you've always had American culture and everybody loves American. No, they don't. No, they don't. So he had warned us this. So he was kind of keeping an eye on everybody. So when we get to Italy and we're all put into these kind of apartment dorms, what was very cool about mine was that it happened to be on top of the Versace store. So it was the second floor of the Versace store, which was really cool. And anyway, so Ron says, if you start to get edgy, he's like, come talk to me and we'll go take a walk and we'll talk about it. So I was so excited to try to speak Italian that I went to a store first day, and I ended up, and I can't even say it in Italian anymore, I ended up trying to talk to the guy, and he kept saying, no, so, I don't understand. And I finally said, in Italian, "I'm sorry, I don't speak English." And he said, so I said, "I think it's time to call Ron." So I called Ron and he said, "Let's go take a walk." He goes, "I know a pizza place." Now, pizza in Italy is different. If you don't know that, look it up. It's really different. So he's taking this walk, and I should explain where we lived. We lived in the city of Firenze, which is Florence, which is a medieval city of the Medicis. If you love art and culture, Medicis, I loved the Medicis. And I'd never seen this city. I think the only thing I'd ever seen previous to that was a show years ago called Art of the Western World, if anybody remembers that from PBS. So I didn't know anything about the city. And we're walking down where we lived was in the medieval part of the city, so it actually has the stone streets and all of that, and the buildings are all fairly simple the way they have always been. So I'm talking to him, and he's telling me about this pizza place, and we're walking, and I look at him, and I'm kind of looking around, and I said, "Hey, Ron, isn't that where the market is on Saturdays?" And he stops, and he turns to me, and he goes, "Crystal, there hasn't been a market there since the 15th century. He goes, "How do you know that?" And I'm like, "I don't know." I said, "But that's where the market is, I guarantee you." And sure enough, we walk over, and there's these little table things that are built into the side of the street where the market was. And he says, "I don't know how you know that." I said, "I don't know." Go on. So this was not my only experience like this in living in Italy. So we go to we're going to the university, and the whole time I lived in Florence, I had a map, because that's what you do, you get a map, right? I didn't need the map. Everywhere I went, inside the medieval city of Florence, I knew where I was. And I would say, "That's where the Medici house is. That's where the university is." And I never got lost. My apartment was 3 miles from the university, and I never missed it once. I was always there. So I'm living there, I'm having all these wonderful experiences, and I have lots of stories of things that happened there, but I want to tell you about a couple that happened. I did all of this because I do really live by the idea of you only live once. But the longer I spent in Italy, I started to think maybe I've lived more than once. You know, I kept finding things that I wasn't supposed to know, and even though I wasn't an art major and I didn't study art, when we took the art class, I was absolutely enthralled with Botticelli. And at one point, the art teacher took us to the Uffizi Gallery, which is where they have the 2 big Botticellis, Birth of Venus and La Primavera. And I was so excited because I'm like, we're going to we're going to go see the Botticellis, Well, this art teacher wanted to be very thorough, and he's like, "Okay, you get 5 minutes in every room, and they're all separated." And he was rushing. He's like, let's go, we gotta go on. We got a time, they only give a certain amount of time here. And so I was like, "When are we gonna see him?" And I'm like, and I saw a Da Vinci, and I was like, "Whoa!" And he's like, no, we gotta go. So we're rushing, and all of us are getting really mad. We're like, "Come on, this is art, we're gonna see art." And then we walk into the room with the Botticellis. And if you've never seen this, it is a very large room. And those paintings are huge, 25, 30 feet long. And there's nothing that you can ever see on film or video or photographs that describes how amazing those paintings are. Wow. And we walk in, and he sits down. He says, "I'll see you in 30 minutes. And I remember sitting in front of the Birth of Venus and just seeing every brush stroke and just feeling like this is what I was here for. Like, I would never have seen this if I had said to myself, I can't afford that, or poor people don't go to college, or I don't need to get on a plane and go to Europe, or I'm not going to overcome this culture shock. Yeah. And I was so just in love with the city and the statue of David and all of these things. And there's one more thing I want to share about that time, because so much of my life came out of this. So much of my life is better for having experienced just a different culture, just the greatness, the learning to speak Italian. I'll tell you, when you have to buy groceries, language becomes very important because you can't touch the groceries there. You have to be able to communicate what you want, and they go back on the counter and get it for you. So I learned Italian pretty well at that point. But my final part of this story, and this kind of weird, like, past life experience and this feeling of just my brain expanding as I went. Unlike a lot of the people in the program, I didn't have money to travel on the weekends. We only went to school 4 days a week. And so I spent my entire time in Italy, or in Florence, except one trip to Rome that the community took. But that was okay, because I was in Florence. Like, you know, there's so much there, so much to do. And so I used to go to this place that was the Medici Summer Palace called the Boboli Gardens. And for the equivalent of about $2, you could spend your entire day in the Boboli Gardens, which had this huge palace and a huge garden with water features and all this stuff. Well, it had this very large stair step, you know, in the grand Italian way. And you had to wait for it to open at a certain time. I think it opened at noon on Sundays. And so I remember taking my little Walkman with my mixtape that I had made, and sitting on the steps waiting for it to open. So it's a Sunday, I'm waiting for it to open, and I'm listening to Tom Petty's Learning to Fly. Big Tom Petty fan, really like it. And so I'm sitting there and I'm writing in my little journal and I'm sitting at the thing. And as it comes up, I'm learning to fly. And every single bird in the entire piazza came right over me in a second. And I was just in awe of this American-Italian experience of the birds and the song and everything coalescing in my brain, and I'm the only person in the square that can hear it. And the ending to that is, at that moment, I looked across the piazza and I saw somebody that looked exactly like me, only about the age I am right now.
Wow. As I'm listening to all of these stories and I get comfortable in my seat and then I remember, oh, I'm supposed to get back up. So I'm just getting lost in all of them. So thank you. These are amazing stories. We have 2 more storytellers to end our night, and it has been so great so far. What a gift to have Becky Keller. Becky, where are you? Okay, Becky is doing her story last minute. Are you prepared? Were you prepared?
Well, no, I have a story.
Becky comes ready, all right? They say you got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Becky's ready. And Becky, I'm so grateful that you are joining us tonight and sharing your story. So please help me welcome Becky Keller.
Just a little bit about me. I grew up in this area. I graduated from Highline High School, and I went to Sunset Junior High, if anybody ever remembers that, and also to Sylvester for a while, and to Sunnydale. So, and I retired out of the Kent School District. Well, I was 46 years old. I had been divorced for 3 years. I didn't have a lot of money, but I figured it was time to get out. I needed to meet some people, and I always wanted to learn to dance. I thought about this, and how am I going to do this? I was off at the secondhand store, and what do I see but a brand new, unused pair of Fred Astaire women's dance shoes. $5. So I bought those shoes. Well, now, the thought of dancing, and I really wanted to do this, but this was no small feat for me. I remember back in junior high when my friend said, "You want to try out for a cheer?" And I'm thinking, and they said, "Let's just do this routine, let's go." And I'm going, and I thought, no, this is not my thing. So, but I had a good sense of rhythm, and I really wanted to learn how to do ballroom dancing. So, I got myself dressed up, and I went off to the Rocking Horse Dance Barn in Renton. I sat out in the parking lot for 45 minutes. I don't want to go in. You got yourself dressed up, get in there. I don't want to go in. I'm scared. I don't want to go in. I took the step, I went through the door. Well, I watched, and I found out that they gave a pre-dance lesson before the dance. And so next time I was going to go to that pre-dance lesson. I couldn't afford to have private lessons or to, to the Arthur Murray. And so I did the pre-dance lessons. Now when you're dancing and you're starting out, you don't get too many people to ask you to dance. They spend a lot of time, they spend a lot of money, and some of them are real kind, a lot of, and so they'll ask you to dance once or twice. So, but I took lessons. I would take those pre-dance lessons, I'd go to the community center, and then I went down to the Seattle Center that was having folk life. You gotta practice. So I go down there and maybe somebody asked me to dance, And this guy comes up. He was old, but he was gonna ask me to dance. So I'm as stiff as a board. And you gotta learn to follow. So, bless his heart, he takes me, and he goes, ooh, and I was just so excited. I said, oh, thank you, Well, I took lessons, I kept going, I mustered the courage to step out there and show up and go to dance. I met some wonderful people, some interesting people. And I met my buddy George. Now, my buddy George was 20 years my senior. He was not a romantic interest. And I said, well, you gotta forgive me. And he says, come on out and dance. And he says, it should be about fun and not so much about form. Relax, have fun. And then I met my dear friend Rose. And then I met all kinds of interesting people. And then I would go to the dances and they'd do the mixers. And sometimes there'd be 120 single people there. And so you'd have, just like they used to do, in junior high, where the boys are on the one side. And I didn't figure this out for quite a while. But I'd see these women, I'm in a line, and they just, football stance, knock you out of line. I think, wow, doesn't she like me? What? I don't know. Then I figured it out. He was number 17, and that was her man. And I was in the 17th spot, so she knocked me out so she could get him. So, but I was learning to dance, and I got the cowboy cha-cha down. So I did ballroom and I did western. And I learned how to waltz, I learned how to swing. I learned how to do some salsa and some cha-cha. And so, I was dancing. I was getting better and better. Now sometimes they'd say, okay, now you're hopping around like a kangaroo. You need to kind of smooth it out. But the more I went, the more I showed up, the more courage I had to come out and dance, the better I got. And so I'd go out with my buddy George. He would pick up other ladies, we'd all meet up, and George would drive 4 or 5 ladies to the dance, all the single ladies. And we always would say, George, if you settle in with one of us, the rest of us would have a revolt. But, so, I got better and better. And then George lived with Bill, because George would live in Washington 6 months out of the year and then go down to Mexico. And so he lived with his buddy Bill when he was up here. And then Gil also lived with Bill. So Gil was, he was one of these people, a retired clown, professional clown, and he was a cross between Fred Astaire and Michael Jackson as far as his dancing. He was amazing. He would go backwards and tip backwards and go down and then jump back up and move it and make it all nice smooth. So he's modern dance and ballroom dancing. He says, you come on out to the Muckleshoot. We're going to have great music out there and we'll dance together. Now again, Gil was never a romantic interest, but he said, come and dance with me. And so I was relax and follow me. And so I would dance, and he was very good. And then, We were dancing along, and we were doing somewhat of a nightclub two-step. Now that is where you kind of make some bigger sweeping steps. The place is packed because Darren Batavity is playing wonderful jazz music that you can dance to. It's packed. And we're dancing. I'm dancing with Gil. And then all of a sudden I realize people are dropping away. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they're looking at me. I said, just watch him. Don't look at the people, just follow him. Follow him. And it was magical. It was magical. I was Ginger Rogers. I was out there dancing. The person who had, 2 left feet, but persistence. I was gliding across that dance floor, and it was only the two of us. It was my brush with greatness. It was wonderful. I felt like Cinderella, and I was dancing. Well, what did I learn? I learned to dance, but I also learned, and I always have to remember, not to be scared, to show up, and not be afraid to make mistakes, and get out there. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We are going to close the night with a repeat, and we're going to have Tracy come and tell us one more story. Is that okay with y'all? Awesome. Welcome back, Tracy. Quasier.
Oh, yes.
Ah.
Thank you. When my husband first asked me to take his name, I was like, well, I can't say it and I can't spell it. But weirdly, my maiden name was Campbell, and you would not believe the number of people that didn't know how to spell it. And I would say, like, the soup, and then they would say either Lipton or, more popular, I eat the soup, lady, I don't spell the soup. So I didn't really plan on working on Wall Street. In fact, I had moved to New York, I had my English degree, and I was going to work in something really creative. And then I quit my job in a huff, which is something you do, right? And then I didn't have money for rent, and so I went to a temp agency, which was popular in New York, and they kept sending me to finance interviews, and I kept saying, I'm an English major and I'm not very good at math. But I went, and they kept offering me more money. Now, when I started in New York, I was making $14,000 a year, which even then I would have qualified for food stamps. And I decided that I was going to need $18,000 in my new job. That was my cutoff, man. If I was going to make $18,000, I was going to be like, I could afford the New York Times, right? I mean, I was big. So I went to this job interview, and they offered me $22,000, and I was like, And I even said, So let me guess. So you guys just come in and you take a pile of money and then you make it bigger. That's what you do here. And they said yes. And I go, is that all then? And they go, well, we come in the next day. And so then you have more money, and then you, like on Tuesday, you grow it again. And they're like, yeah. And I said, Republicans, right? I don't think this is going to work. And I turned it down. And then they called me back, and they said, would you like more money? And I was like, damn, more than 22? Like, what would that be like? So I came back in, and they said, well, we want you to come in next week and take a typing test. Because I was going to be like a research assistant to some white boys. And so there was Working Woman's Magazine, which I was very excited that I could maybe afford Working Woman's Magazine subscription on $22,000 a year. And they said it was very important that women do not do well on typing tests because we get held back if we're very good typists, right? And so I intentionally flunked my typing test, like 14 words a minute with 6 mistakes or something really pathetic. And my boss, who did end up hiring me, said I could just tell. I could just tell that you were gonna bring something great here. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I flunked the typing test. They offered me, I think, 28. So now I'm doubling my money. And then part of the Working Woman's Magazine said that women tend to get stuck in all of the admin work because we're good at it and we're caretakers. And to don't Xerox and don't telex and don't fax. And so on my final interview, they said, do you have any concerns? And I said, well, you know, I am photosensitive, which is true. So I really don't want a Xerox. And they were like, okay. And yeah, and then with the typing, like, is there going to be a lot of that? Because I'm not really sure. And they said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to hire a secretary for you. And I was like, double the money and I get a secretary? So this woman sat at the end of my desk and did my typing and my Xeroxing. It was really, really phenomenal. So I started out at 28, and then they said, you know, you'd really be good down on the trading desk. And I was like, oh, with all the Republicans. But I have to tell you one thing. At the time in the 80s, they were very handsome. I mean, out of 300 men, 298 were GQ models. So I'll give them that. They were also very motivated men and doers. So there was something attractive about all that. And so then they said, well, you have to take the stockbroker's test. And I was like, oh, good God, what do people want from me? But I did. I took the stockbroker's test. And then it's similar to the bar. So you study for like 18 months, and then it's like a 12-hour test. It's ridiculous. And so I failed by 1 point. I don't know why they told me that. They said, it's a shame. You got a 69. If you had a 70, you'd be a stockbroker tomorrow. But you got a 69. So I went to my friend Barbara, who had gotten 98 on the same test, my study buddy. And I was like, listen, here's the deal. You're going to sell me a point for $1. And she's like, sure. So we go to the legal department, tickety, we type it up. And then I go to the NASDAQ, not the NASDAQ, the National Association of Security Dealers. And I said, listen, for $1, I have purchased a point because my friend Barbara doesn't need 98 points to be a broker or even 99 points to be a broker. And they said, are you nuts? I said, you just spent 18 months talking about the buying and selling of a marketplace. I have created a marketplace. I just need 1 point because otherwise I'm going to have to go back to night school for another year. It was horrible. But I did, and then I passed it legit the next year, and so then I'm down on the desk, and basically the best way I can explain my job is that I'm well, first of all, I'm a really wicked fast typist. And so I am writing on the crawler all day, which had always been very boring. And because I'm an English major, I'd write little limericks about the stock market going down and stuff. And so then the traders were like, what the hell is that? And then they paid attention though. So that was supposed to be my job, was to get the traders more involved. And so that worked. And then one time Chrysler had an extra 10 million in cash at the end of the quarter, but M and B are really close on the keyboard, and so I gave them 10 billion in cash. And then the European markets opened higher the next day, and I call my friends, I'm like, what's going on? They're like, there's some analyst at Bear Stearns that says that Chrysler has $10 billion and they're gonna buy Peugeot, and I was like, oh shit. Okay, sorry about that. I guess that's gonna come down. A couple of little foibles along the way, but that happens. So I'm creating this thing, and it's awesome, and I'm still making like 28, and I'm maybe getting another 10 in overtime, if that. But my predecessor had made 175 because he was a guy. And so I went to my boss and said, hey, so like the 175, and he said, well, that's just for guys. And I was like, but I got my stockbroker Verstuckene license after like 2.5 years of crawling through the dark at night. And so the answer was no. But they said, listen, here's what we do. We'll make it up for you a bonus. Because that was the big thing, was like, what did you get for your bonus? And so most of the people in the trading desk were getting like 500,000, a couple of million. And so I asked some of my guys, I'm like, what do you think I'm gonna get? And they said, you should get at least 25, 30 grand. And I'm like, oh my God, finally, like it's gonna happen, right? Because up until then, I still am having a hard time making, and then meet in New York on 28,000 all by myself. And I'm like, oh my God, so then I spend like 2 months into bonus season. I have this whole spreadsheet and all this money I made for them. And I didn't mention the European money that we made because I the million and the billion. I didn't bring that up, but we did make money off of that. And so I had this whole plan, and I really thought like 50,000 was gonna be kind of appropriate. compared to the guys making 500. And so then I get my bonus check. I'm so excited because I'm like, this is the moment, this is it. I'm gonna remember this day forever. And I do, because I open the envelope and it's $500. 500, and then a dot, not a comma, a dot. And you only live once. I lose my head, and I had grown up a little bit in Texas, and so the one thing I had to learn in New York was to scrape out my southern accent, because people be like, oh, where are y'all from, Ellie Mae? So I learned, but the one thing on the trading desk, and just in general, was that when I really was under a lot of pressure, I just completely forgot, and I would sound like Ellie Mae Clampett. And so Ellie Mae Clampett and I went into the boss's office. I locked the door because I knew here was in my head, I was going to show him the spreadsheet again. And he was just going to rip out a checkbook and write a new check, because I'm like 20-something and you just think that's how it works. And so I sit down and I say a lot of really politically incorrect things. And he just looks at me and I'm like, I am missing, I think, 2 zeros. I'm doing the math. Is it 500, 5,000? Well, anyway, I am missing zeros. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to sit here until you find me the extra several thousands of dollars that you, because then I was like, well, should I subtract the 500 from the 10,000 I'm expecting? Because, I'm an English major and I like rules. And so, anyway, and I'm not good at math details. And I call him horrible names, and he doesn't seem to care. And then he goes back to work. And then it's very awkward because, well, for many reasons, but I hadn't planned that that was going to be the response. I thought maybe he'd get mad at me and then I'd get mad at him and then we'd yell. But he just goes back to work. And then he looks up and he says, oh, you're still here? And I was like, you stole zeros from me. And as I mentioned earlier, when I locked the door on the way in, that seemed like a really big deal to me at the time. I'm going to wait here until you find my zeros. And he goes, okay. And then he pushes the intercom on his secretary and he says, hey, Doreen, can you call security? And I'm like, oh my God! Well, that's not negotiating. Well, and so then, well, now what am I going to do? I can't leave. Should I be dragged out by security? Do I put that on my resume? Interface with security? I mean, come on. And then we wait, and we're sitting there, and I'm like, oh my God, I did not have a plan B. I'm usually a planner. But I was all into the moment. I was going to go in. I was going to get my zeros. However many owed me. He owed me a couple of zeros. And then there's a knock on the door, and he can't open the door because I won't let him come to the door. So then he intercoms Doreen again and says, can you unlock my door? Oh shit, I didn't think about the fact that Doreen would unlock the door. Oh my God. And in walks Lawrence Kudlow, also known as Larry Kudlow. Larry Kudlow, in case you don't know, was the senior economic advisor to the White House for most Republican terms, including the most recent Mr. Trump also hired my friend Larry to be the economic advisor. Very suave, very, very suave, very, he in his office, he actually replicated the Oval Office so that we would not forget that he had been in the White House. And I would call him Larry, and he'd say, it's Lawrence. And I'm like, oh, come on, Larry, we're old pals. Anyway, so there it is. Doreen's unlocking the door of what I consider to be a hostage situation that has gone horribly awry. And Larry Kudlow walks in, Lawrence Kudlow, senior White House economic advisor. And he says, what the fuck? And he goes, what are you doing here? And I said, well, my bonus check is missing several zeros. And he goes, no kidding. Me too. How many zeros are you missing? And I said, well, at least 2. And then he said, yeah, I'm missing 3. And I was like, oh my God, seriously? Oh my God, so we have something in common? And he's like, we do. And I go, That is so awesome, Lair. Thank you. And then I left feeling, well, not really empowered because I was also almost dragged out by security men, but I was so excited that he had screwed over the entire floor and that it wasn't just me that was missing zeros. But if Mr. White House economic advisor Larry was missing 3 zeros, well, then maybe my life wasn't so bad after all.
Wow, thank you. Can we give another round of applause to all of our storytellers tonight? Whenever I am walking around Burien in this area, I tend to look at people that I've heard tell their stories, and I'm like, oh, and I want to go engage with them because I feel like I know them, and then I realize they have no idea who I am. I don't. But I hope that you have this sense of like, oh, I know that person, right? There is some gift to being able to be present and hearing stories and joining together in that. And so thank you again for being a wonderful audience. Thank you to our storytellers. Thank you to our partners for another wonderful evening of storytelling. And if you are so inspired, we invite you to tell your stories as well. So Sybil, will you tell us what's coming up?
I will. February 23rd. February 23rd, the themes are the perfect storm, aligned and positive, or hot mess. So it's the perfect storm, or aligned and positive, or hot mess. It sounds like 3. So you can always take these themes and interpret them quite broadly. March 22nd is the 4th Friday of every month. That's the pattern. So March 22nd is paths not taken or diary entries. We've already got people signed up for that one. April 26th is duped or aha. And May 24th, chance encounters or tiny acts. So we'd love to hear your stories, and Seven Stories is on Meetup, so you can join us on Meetup or BurienCultureHub.org/7 stories. You're in the B-Town blog has an access to us, so you can find 7 stories in a variety of places. And thank you. What an audience and what stories.